Hello, everyone. Welcome to another weekly episode of Shadow Space. I am your host, Laura Brown. I always like to start by thanking all of my returning listeners because you guys mean the world to me, especially your continued support and your engagement with my content. Thank you so much for coming back here and tuning in and spreading the word and sharing my content with anyone who may benefit from these topics. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And to all of my new listeners who are not familiar with who I am your host, Laura Brown. I am a certified breathing, meditation, and trauma-informed coach. I publish weekly episodes related to self-development, to introspection, to self-discovery, and to working with the shadow. Which is most often just the hidden beliefs that we hold of ourselves and some of the patterns and unconscious ideas that we have of ourselves. So I created this podcast to really help those who are seeking deeper understanding, answers, or simply wanting to know more about themselves and how they can improve in these areas where they may feel stuck. However, I do like to share a full disclaimer that I'm not a licensed therapist. And by all means, the topics and ideas that I share on my podcast are not meant to diagnose or treat anyone. I do realize that I cover some topics here that may be very sensitive, but the topics I discuss are references to my own personal life, to my own personal experiences and my journey. So I always like to advise anyone I speak to, especially if you're suffering in some area of your life, please do reach out and seek the professional support that you may need because it is so important to really share that. And I really encourage anyone to just use your best discernment when it comes to your health and well-being. There is so much support out there, and I would be happy to also be here and available to you guys as I always am. So feel free to reach out to me as well. And I'll be happy to refer you to any support or guidance that I can think of. Okay, so with all that being said, I have another exciting topic that I'd like to dive into with you guys today. And today I do want to talk about self-doubt. I say that and I laugh because this is it's been a very challenging journey for me, to be very candid when it comes to self-doubt. Self-doubt is very much a part of my experience and something that I am learning to overcome every single day. So I just want to start by putting that out there because I talk to a lot of people who suffer with self-doubt. And, I think the misconception is always that, you get to a certain place where you no longer suffer from self-doubt. And yeah, that would be awesome. It would be ideal. I think we all dream of that. But the way I understand self-doubt, especially from my own personal experience with it, is that self-doubt doesn't discriminate at all. It really doesn't care who you are. It doesn't care where you are in your life. And it certainly doesn't care what your background or your stature is in life. I think self-doubt affects all of us to a certain degree. And especially if we're going after something that we really care about. Because as human beings, right, we're wired to want to feel like what we're doing is appreciated and that we are liked, we are loved, and that we are accepted in our society. So whenever we do something that we really, really care about, such as starting a new project, like my podcast, for example, or, going after that dream job or going after that business idea that you've always wanted to create, whatever your situation may be, I think anytime we start something like that, in general, we may question ourselves a lot, right? And we may seek that validation externally without even being aware of it. And we may do this in a very unconscious way. So that's why I wanted to talk about self-doubt. And before I share my perspective on it as a whole, I did do some research because I wanted to understand self-doubt for myself too on a broader context. And so by definition, self-doubt is one's lack of confidence in one's ability. So by definition, self-doubt is just lack of confidence in ourselves and our abilities. Okay? And so some examples of that might be not trusting our decision when we make a decision in a situation, or maybe even being afraid to speak up because we don't think we're good enough. So some of those things may be, how you're exhibiting self-doubt in your life. And the other thing that I found really interesting in my research is that self-doubt can arise, apparently, based on how the important people in our life react to our judgments or mistakes. And that rang so true to me in so many ways. So, for example, if you make a mistake and let's just say growing up, when you made a lot of mistakes and let's say maybe your parents were really harsh with you, right? In how they responded to those mistakes or very judgmental, you may not realize that you have perhaps never dealt with that part of you. And you may be carrying some of those habits of doubting yourself as a result of what happened to you in your childhood. So I thought that was really interesting, to understand about self-doubt. I certainly did not understand that, but I can see how the two may be connected, right? And so the root cause of self-doubt could stem from somewhere like that for you as well, through your experiences growing up, or just in life in general, with partners, with friends, with whomever was important in your life. So by definition, that is what self-doubt is. And the way this has showed up for me in my life, I'm going to use myself here also as an example, especially when it came to actually putting myself out there finally and doing this podcast. I can't tell you guys how many years this podcast has been in the making. And I was talking to a friend not long ago, and I was almost embarrassed to admit how long it took me to finally have the courage to let go of my own self-judgment and my own self-doubt and my own inner critic, to finally be able to be here in the space and sharing my voice with you guys. Because for so many years, this has always been my dream, right? And so I've always wanted to, share a platform and a space where I can, share my experiences with others and be a support and be helpful in whichever way I can be. But I couldn't get out of my own way. And it wasn't that somebody was actually doing this to me. It was actually me and just all of the doubts that were just clouding my own judgment of my own ability. I have so many times where I've tested the podcast. I have tons of episodes that I shot and never had the courage to publish because I would always find something that I didn't like. I would pick it apart. Oh, I didn't like how I sounded. My voice wasn't, I didn't have the correct cadence in my voice. I can go on and on and on, but I don't want to bore you guys. But you guys get the idea. So I would pick myself apart completely. And by the time I was done with that, there was no space for me to even be at a place where I can actually allow myself to publish anything. And so I held on to so much content and just always told myself, okay, one day. And the dream never went away, thankfully for me. And I would always say, okay, maybe one day I will do it. Maybe I'll have the courage. Maybe I will find the space where I can let go of my own doubt one day. And I'm so grateful that I have, because this has been, and I can really get emotional here, but I love podcasting. I love being here. I love sharing my voice. It's just so therapeutic and so cathartic in ways that I can't explain. and hopefully also so helpful and valuable and useful for you guys, because that's really why I do it. But it really took me such a long time, and it's been such an inner battle and an inner struggle of mine to learn to overcome. And so, if you guys are dealing with self doubt, I want you to understand that you are not alone, and that truthfully, self doubt never goes away. It's just a part of who we are as human beings. We want to do well. We want to feel like what we do is important and we care about what we do, right? And so when we are going after something and putting ourselves out there, naturally we're going to have that inner critic chime in, because that's what our mind is designed to do. It's really just to feed us scenarios that may not even be real and they may not be true, right? And but if we buy into that, we create that state for ourselves. And sometimes that state can be very debilitating. And so this is where I was on my journey for so many years before I actually found the courage to actually let myself create this podcast and put myself out there. I was at a place where I felt so stuck, where I just couldn't do anything. I couldn't get past myself, right? And you may feel that way too, but I want you to understand that you're not alone in this, and that it is something that we have to learn to overcome and practice all of the time. And with that also, I don't believe, and this is my personal opinion on this, I don't believe we'll ever get rid of self-doubt. I think we just, as we continue to work on our self-confidence, right, and our positive self-talk, which are some of the things that I'm going to cover a little bit later, we just learn to get to a place where the self-doubt is not as prevalent anymore, right? And it's not such a big part of our life. It may still be there, because as we continue to grow and evolve and do things that we care about, we might still question ourselves and might still unconsciously seek validation and reassurance from those around us that, hey, what we're doing is important and that it's helpful and that it is good, and that it is beneficial, right? And so that may still come up, but it may not be so big and so overwhelming for us to overcome. So the more we practice, right, some of the practical steps that I will share, the more we can learn to overcome self-doubt. So with that being said, I also did a little bit of research to understand some of the recommendations, right, on how we can overcome self-doubt. And this is very useful for me too. As I mentioned to you guys, this is very much a part of my life that is very relevant. As I continue to build my podcast, there are days where I sit here and go, all right, was that episode good enough? Was it helpful? Is it useful? You know, is the content I'm sharing going to be something that someone can reference as a guide or as a tool? So very much a part of my life. And so how do we overcome this? So I did some research and I found some practical steps, right? And I want to share that with you guys. And this is from Psychology Today. So how can we overcome self-doubt? So self-doubt is, as I mentioned, very much a part of our life. But to overcome it, some of the recommendations here are we can try to cultivate a sense of our worth by increasing some external factors like how people treat you and your decisions and the amount of money you make. Actually, that doesn't sound right. I don't think that's what they meant by this, but we'll go with that. And, so practicing some self-love, right? And so unconditional love. And, there's so many tools out there that speak about self-love, learning to put yourself first, learning to understand that your needs are valid, right? Learning to make time for yourself, and learning, right, to practice positive self-talk. we talked about this in my previous episodes where I talked about the negativity spiral and how can we overcome negative self-talk. So using positive self-talk is some of the ways we can overcome self-doubt, which is I couldn't agree more. We have to learn to say kind things to ourselves. We have to be our biggest support, right? As we would want to support someone else. And we have to learn to be compassionate with ourselves, right? And give ourselves grace through our journey. This is all the things that we would do for another person. And so we have to learn to flip that around and also give that and pour into ourselves. So, in order for us to overcome self doubt, we have to learn to practice some of these, skills. We can't continue to beat ourselves apart and beat ourselves down and beat ourselves to shred and expect ourselves to show up confident and to not doubt our abilities. It doesn't go together, right? And we wouldn't do that to a friend anyway. So we have to learn to practice these skills towards ourselves as well. So in psychology today, these are some of the ideas that they share. And another one that they shared is develop desirable personal qualities to build your strengths, right? And so, but some of the qualities is what I just mentioned, right? Learning to be more compassionate with yourself, learning to give yourself grace, and learning, right, to be extremely kind to yourself and learning to be gentle. That's another one. It's a big one that I have had to learn because we can be our worst critic. We can quite frankly be our own worst nightmare, and we can be our most harshest judge, which I've also found in myself, right? I think I've shared in previous episodes how my friends were saying when I talked about going to the gym and some of the things I was nitpicking about myself, some of my friends were like, "You're absolutely insane. People would kill to look like you. People will kill to feel like you." And so we can also be our worst critic and our worst judge, right? So learning to build some of those strengths in ourselves, and then using positive affirmations, right? So, I like to use things like I am strong, I am capable, I am doing my best, and that is good enough, right? Because we are truly doing the best that we can at any given point. We may not always have the same capacity every day, but we are doing our best. And then really helping yourself understand that you are capable of doing anything that you put your mind to. So, positive affirmation of mine that I love too is I am capable of anything I put my mind to. So, these are all ways we can learn to overcome self-doubt. And so, I really encourage you guys on your journey to really build that reassurance in yourself. And one of the other things I've learned about myself when it came to self-doubt is really learning to trust myself. Self-trust is the foundation of overcoming self-doubt, in my personal opinion. And I will talk more about trust in another episode. I really do want to dive into that one because I think it's really important to talk about trusting oneself and learning to trust oneself. And so I'll share my perspective on that on perhaps my next episode or one of the episodes that will be coming up. So building self-trust and how we do that. And for me, I had to change my whole perspective on that because I am a very reliable person for everyone else around me. Most people who know me will always say, "You're there for me. You show up for me. I can count on you. You're someone that I can trust." And that is a beautiful thing. And I'm so grateful for that. But then I had to look at myself and say, do I actually trust myself? And a lot of times I found that I did not because of, the self-doubt. But also I had to reverse engineer it in some way because I said, all right, well, if I don't trust myself, why is that? And how can I trust myself more? And so one of the key things that I will share is that learning to trust yourself is a big deal. But learning to trust yourself is something that we have to always continue to practice. I had to learn that the promises I make to myself are just as important as the promises I might make to someone else or for someone else. And so if I can show up for someone because I don't want them to feel like I'm letting them down, I need to be able to do that for myself as well. And that is what builds trust in oneself. And so, and that goes beyond just, I want to go to, the gym every, 5 days a week. It goes beyond that. It's really just being able to rely on yourself and trust yourself to show up for yourself, right? Understanding that difficult things may come up, or challenging things may come up, or things that are undesirable may come up, and that you may have the inclination to give up and not go forward with it or go forth with it, but that you trust yourself enough that you can show up for yourself even in those moments. So really building the self-trust is the foundation piece to learning to overcome self-doubt. Okay, so hopefully this was helpful to you guys as well. I know there's so much that we can talk about self-doubt, because self-doubt is one of those things that will continue again in our life for as long as we're unaware of it, right? And it really can get in the way of us moving forward in our life, because if we're constantly doubting our abilities, we may not go for opportunities that we dream about, right? If we're constantly afraid of failure because we don't have the confidence in ourselves, we may not have the courage to do something new or try something new. If we don't practice self-compassion, right, we may always continue to criticize ourselves and put ourselves down. And that is just so counterproductive when we're out there building a life, going after our dreams and trying to achieve, our wildest dreams. It's very counterproductive to that. So we need to learn to build these skills and the qualities that I shared earlier in order for us to learn to overcome self-doubt. And also we need to perhaps understand that self-doubt is not going to magically disappear. It would be ideal if no one ever doubted themselves, because I think we would all give ourselves the opportunity to be more, do more, and dream for so much more. I, for one, have always had dreams of not only being here and creating my podcast and being a guide to many, but to also I have endless dreams that I know I can achieve and accomplish. But a lot of times I am the one getting in my own way. And that's really important for us to recognize, because it's easy to point the finger and say, well, this circumstance is not allowing me to do X, Y, and Z. This person is not allowing me to do X, Y, and Z. My environment is not conducive for me to do X, Y, and Z. And we can give countless excuses as to why we're not going after what we want to go after. But if we don't address, right, the root cause of some of the issues that are underlying, such as our self-doubt, perhaps, and our lack of confidence in ourselves and our abilities and the way we talk to ourselves, and the trust that we may or may not have in ourselves, we can never move the needle forward. And that's the whole point of doing the shadow work. It's really to understand the underlying issues that you may not be fully aware of, that is hindering you on your path and on your journey. And so the shadow aspect is so important to examine. And this is why I am so grateful for the shadow work that I continue to do for myself, because it really does open up your eyes to so much, right? and so many things that you may be overlooking or unconsciously aware of, or perhaps are aware of and just don't want to deal with. You know, when we dive into the shadow, we can really examine these areas of our life from a place of non-judgment, right? I always like to say that, because if we continue to judge ourselves, we're not going to be able to see things clearly, right? We will have a clouded judgment in everything that we do. But if we look at ourselves from, for example, just how we would look at a friend, we might see things a little bit more clearly for ourselves as well. And the point of doing this is not really to really, honestly, it's not to crucify yourself or to tell yourself that you are less than, or to put yourself down. The point of doing this is to understand that there is a path forward. There's a possibility. There's an opportunity. There's endless opportunities, And so by being aware, you can explore these possibilities to move forward in your life. And so this is why it's so important to do the shadow work and really to allow yourself to dive in these areas of yourself. And so today it's self-doubt. Tomorrow it might be, you explore the fear and what's holding you back there, right? And as you continue on your journey, you might discover so much about yourself, and the other important piece to the shadow too is oftentimes when we explore these areas, we begin to identify the root cause, right? And why they were there in the first place and how they came about to be, right? I don't even know if that's proper English, but I'm just going to leave that there. How they came to be, perhaps, is what I was trying to say. But it's, all of these components that will help you understand yourself on a deeper level so that you have the tools to be able to overcome what you're dealing with. And so self-doubt is not easy. By all means, nothing is easy, but self-doubt is definitely very challenging. But I encourage you guys to really find ways to support yourself and allow yourself, right, the opportunities that you are so deserving of, the opportunities that are all around you, and all the opportunities that you dream about. Allow yourself the opportunity to explore, to move forward, and to learn to overcome the things that are holding you back, such as self-doubt. Okay? All right, guys. So hopefully this episode was very helpful to you guys in some way, or enlightening in some way, as I always like to say. So feel free to reference this anytime you need, a reminder on how to overcome self-doubt or how to empower yourself on the journey. And as always, feel free to reach out to me if you guys have any other questions or want to share your thoughts. I'm always open to those ideas, and I really love to collaborate with my community. So feel free to reach out to me at any time. And please remember, as always, to spread your light. And also remember the light exists within you. And as always, love and light, peace and blessings, guys. I'm going to leave you here with the episode, and I hope you guys have an amazing weekend. And I look forward to chatting with you guys again on my next episode. Bye.